Good morning, and here we are back again. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Welcome to Who Closed Last Night.
So here we are. Who Closed Last Night? Brought to you by Walnut Street Hospitality Group. And these headphones are driving me crazy today. I'm trying to get kind of sexy with my hair. It didn't work in, but we're going to move on. So Who Closed Last Night? And this is brought to you by Walnut Street. And today's topic is going to be who we are is not who we were and not necessarily who we're going to be. So I'm Stan.
And I'm Zach.
And the way this kind of works is this show is about leadership. It's about management. It's about anybody who has a business, runs a business, is a business. That's what we're really about. It's to give some pointers on some fun pointers on how business works. And what we do is we come up with the question, then we come up with some examples of the topic, and then we kind of close with a couple things. We close with the lesson that we hope gets pulled out of this, and we respond to some of the comments and questions that people have asked us. And, throughout this, we try to have a little fun.
Absolutely. I think that we try to take a little shred of truth, a story, an example from our professional lives running restaurants and businesses, tie it to a real life takeaway, the challenges we came across, the obstacles we overcame, how we became successful. And we'd love to share that with you guys. And hopefully it helps someone out there and get to the next level or just get past this rough spot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So before we get started, we want to ask you to follow us, to like us, to share with us. You can reach us on Instagram at Who Closed Last Night, on YouTube, Who Closed Last Night Podcast, Gmail, Who Closed Last Night Pod, TikTok at Who Closed Last Night _, and listen to us on Spotify or YouTube, and we want to hear from you.
Follow, like, and share. Comment in the comment field down below. We'll try to answer your comments on the next show.
Thank you so much. And so let's get started. Who we are is not who we were, is probably not who we're going to be. And so the real life question about this is, can you change who you are from a leadership standpoint? And my take is that yes, you can, and where you are in life is not necessarily where you were and not necessarily where you're going to be, which gets defined by daily life. And I think that's one of the things leadership or leaders have a hard time with, or maybe not a hard time with, but it's a constant acclamation. How's that? Constant acclamation. You're going to learn a new word today, and it's going to be fun. So let's get started. We're going to tell you a little bit about our experiences in leadership. Zach?
Yeah, so I think the position and role I had before coming on board and working with you was what set me up for this role, right? And there was a lot of I wasn't who I am now, right? And I've changed a couple times. And so that's kind of what my story is going to be about. I was an hourly worker in a warehouse. This is while I was in college. And I really enjoyed the job, but I started out loading trucks, and I kept wondering why we were doing some things that just didn't seem like they made sense to me, right? But I wasn't afraid to go ask the boss man, hey, if we did it this way, or can we do it this way, we would need one less person. It made sense, right? And he was always good with changing it, right? Because it came with logic. And so I noticed that I was the only one doing that. Only one coming up with solutions to problems nobody noticed. And that kind of separated me from the rest of the people, but I recognized it separated me, right? So anyways, long story short, I ended up becoming a manager in this warehouse, right? And everybody that worked for me could have been my parent. They were old enough, right? and so immediately I was faced with this change or this question. I asked myself, who did I want to be? How did I want to be perceived, right? And going into this role, I remember on day one, I didn't know what to expect, right? Because I'm college age. Everybody who's working for me is 40 years old. And, but I had a plan. And my plan was to embody, leaders I had before that I enjoyed working for, right?
So would you say that that was the start of your evolution?
I would say recognizing it is the start of your evolution.
Okay.
Yes. You have to know where you are, know where you want to be, and then what? Do the little dots in between to get there. And so that was the start. Walking into a department and warehouse I was familiar with. I was familiar with everything within it, but I wasn't used to leading everybody and being responsible for it. It was a whole new world. And so how I changed along the way is that I didn't have to be an eggplant leader, right? I didn't have to be mean. I didn't have to be aggressive. I didn't have to be a bully, but I had to get them to be excited about completing the tasks that I needed to complete, the goals, the task, and the time frames, and make sure the job got done. And I was able to do that with some energy, with some positive reinforcement, with making sure nobody, I had to stop it if they were getting out of hand, right? But I said, hey, we're here to do a job. This is the job. Let's worry about that later, right? And just kept everybody on task and rowing in the right direction, right? And after my first month, what I learned was that it was working because I didn't know until someone told me, right?
And so you've since then, of course, you're not working in a warehouse anymore.
Absolutely not.
So that was, well, I guess, for lack of a better term, we're going to say that that was chapter one of your evolution.
Yes.
And now you're running different kinds of businesses. So how did you get from chapter one to say chapter three, where you are now, or chapter four, whatever chapter you feel like you're on?
So I think one of the biggest things I learned during chapter one was that I had authority. If I could think it, I should put it into action and let someone tell me that I did it wrong, right?
Okay.
And, ask for forgiveness, not permission. um, but that allowed me to really hit a different gear,
Okay.
right? I no longer had to work on someone else's timeline. I was working on my timeline. If I could see it, I could do it. And then I did it. And then we got praised for it, right? I think a couple of projects where I got positively reinforced by the people that were leading me, I was like, wow, I know what I'm doing, right? And so then I started to think more outside the box. What else could I have? And the word that we're all going to learn today is voluntold. It's a mix between volunteer and being told. So in this warehouse manager position, I was voluntold that I was going to head up the safety department. And, young bright-eyed, bushy-tailed me was like, heck yeah, I'm going to lead this thing. The last 2 years, we've sucked at safety, right? It'll be low-lying fruit. I can do this, right? And so I didn't even know what I was getting into. And I had maintenance department come out and repaint all the yellow stripes on the ground. I had people radioing me every day, telling me that if equipment operator broke the rules, they'd call me. I'd go hold them accountable. And again, I didn't have to be an eggplant to hold them accountable. I had to say, hey, we all know the rules. You obviously are not following the rules. This is your warning, or sign this, or I'm walking you out. Depending on where we were in the disciplinary system, but it reinforced my power. It reinforced my confidence in knowing what I needed to do and what should be getting done.
So now that was in chapter one.
Yeah.
And so how have you changed? How have you adapted, grown?
Yes.
Moved forward to get to where you are now? What are some of the things that happened or that caused you to reflect?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that caused me to reflect is it's a different business. So I had to learn a whole new industry, right? And not saying that it's so different, right? Everything's about a deadline, a process, a system, getting the job done. And I guess that was the biggest lesson I had to learn, that the environment's different, the role of the leader is always the same, right? You got to get your team across the finish line,
Yeah.
right? Now, the way to do that changes with the different industry, the different jobs. But I think once I understood that that the thing that doesn't change is that you have a team to get this job done with, and it doesn't just rest squarely on one person's shoulders. I think that's where a lot of leaders fail.
Gotcha, gotcha. I would agree with you. Um, and I mean, I've seen different chapters of your leadership book, and and I've seen the growth. One of the things that I would say from my own personal experience is I've always been an aggressive driving sort of leader, and I went to work at this. And this is kind of my one of my evolutions. I went to work at this hotel that's pretty well known as the food and beverage director, and I was not. I, I wanted to make a name for myself. I'd been in some kind of I don't want to say lower hotels, but this was a showcase hotel. And when I started to push to be what I was told they wanted this department to be from a food and beverage aspect, I pushed, and I probably had been there 60 days, and I got called into the HR office to meet with the
Dun dun
yeah,
dun.
dun dun dun. It's right. I was like, oh my God, what have
HR
I
means
done?
something bad happened.
I'm sure there's other words other than human resources, but I'm not sure what they are yet. So I went to the human resource office, and they were waiting for me. And I say they because it was the general manager of the hotel and the director of human resources. And I'm like, what? What have I done?
The welcoming
The
party.
welcoming committee. And so at the end of the day, all it was about was a couple people had gone to HR and said, wow, he's really pushing. And, we're kind of feeling it. And I said, well, they asked me why I was doing that. And I said, you hired me to do a job. You hired me to reach a goal, to get across the finish line. And if we want to improve it, we can't let things stay the same. And they're used to a very lackadaisical sort of leadership without any accountability. And that's not how we're going to reach this goal. And they both kind of looked at each other and smiled. And they said, well, look, all we wanted to do was really tell you what people are saying. But if we didn't hear anything about you, we would probably think that you weren't making any progress and you weren't getting anything done or getting anything accomplished. So to me, that was I wouldn't say it was my first evolution because, I was well into my career at that point, but it made me think about leadership differently. I changed, I left there and I maybe softened some of my direction, but I never changed the expectation. And I think if you want to be a leader that gets stuff done, you're going to go through different iterations of who you are as a leader, and it's always going to change. And I think if you're uncomfortable with change, you're probably not going to be a good leader. Would you agree with that?
I would completely agree with that. And I would say I wouldn't have been able to make an impact in the warehouse or in any team or any business if I wasn't comfortable with change. You got to
Yeah.
roll with the punches and know that your internal compass, whether it's morale or the direction of the business, you have to believe in that. And that's why you were put in that position to make that call.
That's exactly right. One of the words that I think is important for all of us to use as leaders, as business operators, as owners, as managers, is the word pivot. You use this word a lot, and I think it's a very appropriate word because you're always tweaking. You always have to read and move and
Yes.
shake and pivot to get to a different angle.
You don't know what is always ahead of you, right? You map out your plan to execute, but then you got to pivot because life happens, right? Some car ran through the restaurant, and now you got to figure out what
That's
to do
a
next.
big pivot.
That's a big pivot, but we'd be pivoting.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Do you remember when the restaurant, one of them in Hawaii, when the drains backed up and we had to close the restroom?
Yes,
And it was maybe 60 days after we opened that restaurant.
yes.
How did we pivot for that?
Oh, it was an all-star pivot, and it was uncomfortable, but we had to do what we had to do. So I think we ordered some porta potties, put them out back with a hand sink. We found the nicest porta potties you can rent on this island of Oahu. Then we had a privacy fence installed around it. And then we turned it into a garden. We had plants, we had bamboo trees, we had some seating chairs out there for the weight. We had some solar lights to keep it illuminated. And we would have us, whenever someone needed to go to the restroom, we'd have a server or a front of house employee walk them all the way around the building to get to the restrooms and hold open the doors the whole time.
I think
That's a pivot.
That's a pivot. But the interesting thing about that I thought was we didn't get any complaints about it, which just blew me away. But it was all about the pivot, how we handled it, and we didn't leave it looking like a construction porta potty.
No.
So before we get,
We didn't hide from it either. We
that's
we were
exactly
very
right.
open. We have 150-year-old cast iron pipes, and they've been disintegrated.
Yep. I think addressing it head on was it was bold because it could have gone the other way.
Yes.
But it didn't, and it worked. And we survived, and, after a week of walking people out there, it kind of changed. So before we get to the lesson, one of the things that I wanted to do is say, Zach,
If you're enjoying our podcast, please follow, like, and share this video to your friends or anybody that you might think would get something out of this. Follow us on Who Closed Last Night _ on Instagram. We have a Facebook at Who Closed Last Night. Watch us on YouTube at Who Closed Last Night Podcast. Email us your Who Closed Last Night story. We'd love to share it with our audience at whoclosedlastnightpod@gmail.com. And follow us on TikTok at Who Closed Last Night _ Finally, listen to us on Spotify.
dun da da da. Okay, so now we're going to get to really the lesson or the takeaway that we would like you to get from this. And all of our podcasts, have a message. And again, we're about business, we're about leaders and leadership. And so the lesson, what we call a real life lesson, is that success changes. You change, and where you were yesterday is not where you are today, and where you are today is probably not where you want to be tomorrow. But it takes some effort, and it takes a little bit of self-analysis to figure out where you are, who you are, what you want to be. And when I say what you want to be, I'm not talking about 10 years down the road. I'm talking about who and what do you want to be tomorrow? Because tomorrow comes before the rest of it. And every day you have an opportunity to reevaluate who you are and how you make yourself better. That, for me, is what this podcast is really about. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
I would completely agree. And I think anybody that has done anything amountable, it starts with a vision. You've got to be able to visualize who you are, who you want to be today, tomorrow, the next couple of days. Because until you're honest with you about who you are now, you can't get to who you want to be.
There you have it. That's one of the things that I think is real important. So the takeaway is look at yourself. Are you happy with where you are? Do you want to be better? Do you want to be way better? Do you want to lead? Do you want to be great? Do you want to be good? And I'm going to go back to one quote, and that is, being good is the enemy of being great. So if you want to focus on being good, then you're probably not going to be great. If you focus on being great, you're going to end up being great. And that's what we want for all of you, is to be great. With that comes some fun stuff. Now, this is one of the things. So, we get comments and we get some questions. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we address them and answer them. And so one of the comments that we got that I think is of importance in one of our past podcasts, it was about marketing.
Yes.
And, we say continuous, marketing is continuous. It It's not advertising. You're not running a sale for something and then you're done. Marketing is keeping out in front of the brand. And so we got a comment from uh, a person, and I don't think we probably need to give away who these people are.
No.
But anyway, they said define continuous marketing. Can you do that? Can you maybe address that?
Absolutely. I think you probably would agree with me. A company like Coca-Cola does it very well, right? You see a semi pass Coca-Cola with the bottle and the red swoosh um, on a billboard. You're driving down the highway, you see the same thing. You walk into a convenience store, there's a vending machine, Coca-Cola on the front. On the cups you get at a restaurant, it'll say Coca-Cola, right? So you go through this day, and we're in Las Vegas, so it's hot outside, and I'm thinking I want a refreshing drink, and I realize subconsciously I want a Coca-Cola because I've been looking at Coca-Cola all day. I'm not even reading the label anymore. I'm just recognizing the branding,
Yeah. So
marketing.
when that's what marketing. And it's continuous marketing, and it's not. I would say that it's not meant to be totally invasive, right?
No.
It's in your subconscious. It's what happens subtly around you, to you, through you. And the next thing you know, you're taking someone into the convenience store and saying, "Hey, let's grab a couple Cokes."
Yep.
And
Yep.
bingo, Coke just made another, $10 from you. So to answer that person's question, continuous marketing isn't continuous sales,
Right.
but it does in some way equal continuous salesmanship.
Right.
Because you're out there, your brand is selling itself. It's Coca-Cola, Nike. They all do it with such great vigor that you can't hardly notice it, or you can't hardly miss it, and you absolutely notice it. So, to answer that question, that's what we think is continuous marketing, staying out front all the time, not necessarily an invasive ad. It's being present. Um, the next one, and this is a good one. I just love some of these. And by the way, our answers to these are our personal experiences, our personal successes. Everybody's got an opinion, right? What's the saying? Opinions are like blah. Everybody's got one. So here's one. One of the first ones we did, one of the first podcasts we did was about hiring and the questions that are good to ask or that have worked for us.
Yes.
And we got a comment from someone. One of our questions is, in 90 days, what will we find out about you that we didn't know now or should have asked or thought, wow, we should have asked that question because, what skeletons are falling out of the closet in a professional way. And so this one responded to us and said, goofball question. Nothing one does in their personal life has any bearing on their professional life. And I'm going to call bull poop.
Bull poop.
So I don't know. Do you think? What do you
I've got a
think?
great example.
Okay.
And this is a real life example. So it was a real life lesson for me in one of the restaurants in Hawaii that I think will prove this statement incorrect. Right. So busiest day of the years is New Year's Day. Right. A lot of places are closed. Everybody's hungover. Everybody had a great night. Right. So the story goes, we give out the schedule 6 weeks in advance for New Year's Day. So everybody's well aware. We try to make them short shifts so it's fair, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, New Year's Days come around. New Year's Days comes around. And I have this employee come in. And now, granted, they've known they were on the schedule for 6 weeks. They come in hungover, maybe a little drunk still, who knows, right? But I guess to this response, their personal life from the night before affected their professional life today, right? And so if you come into work and you can't perform you can't be mentally available because of what you did in your personal life the night previous, I think that's a pretty good example that your personal life can and will affect your professional life.
I absolutely agree with that. I'm going to give another maybe example, a little bit of philosophy here, but I think if you're a dishonest person away from work, what's going to make you change to be an honest person at work? I think people have certain characteristic traits. They're not unchangeable, but they are characteristic traits. If you're lazy outside of work, are you going to be lazy at work? And again, I believe that there are inherent traits, or not, maybe inherent isn't the right word, but there are traits that we all have. And if I'm gonna not have a moral structure away from work, I'm not sure how I'm gonna build a moral structure that works for 8 hours a day only.
Pack it in your lunchbox.
I'm going to have a cheese stick and a cup of morals. Yeah, no, I don't think that's happening.
Yeah,
So
that's not happening.
to this person, I would say, hey, look, I'm not sure what you do or who you are or any of that stuff, but I would say it's hard to be two different people, one person away from work and one person at work. I would say that you are the same person. You might have some different characteristics or traits or different tasks. We'll say different tasks at work than what you have at the house or wherever you are. But I think if you're lazy, you're lazy. If you steal, you steal. If you lie, you lie. And until you become the person you want to be all the time, it's hard to be different. That's my opinion. And I'm sticking to it.
I agree with it. So,
Well, then that's what we got for you. But we got one more message.
please follow, like, and share. Comment below in the comment section. Instagram, Who Closed Last Night _ Facebook, Who Closed Last Night. YouTube, Who Closed Last Night podcast. And one of my favorites is the Gmail, Who Closed Last Night pod. Send your Who Closed Last Night story of the month, the week, the day, the thing that happened 3 years ago that you all still talk about behind the bar, behind in the kitchen.
Your opinion.
Your opinion. And last but not least, listen to us on podcast.
And there you have it. Another podcast down circling the drain, and we're ready to leave for the day. But before we do, we got one word to say to you.
Aloha.